Welcome into the Wednesday edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. My name's Barrett Salee. Appreciate you checking out the show. It is Glasses Day. Why? Well, because there's pollen outside and I hate pollen. So eyes were hurting. So here we go with the glasses. Appreciate you checking it out. Like I say, every single show, appreciate you being part of this show. And look, all we want to do is be part of the college football podcast ecosystem. There are so many great podcasts out there. And look, we're here. All of us are here to give you college football 24/7, 365, because as I've said many times, it is the most undercovered sport in all of American sports. The NBA, way up high, college football, way down low. Those two things should be flipped. Got a big show today. Connor O'Gara from Saturdays Down South will join us. We'll also talk a little bit about Drake Maye in the NFL draft. Look, I'm not the biggest draft guy, but I watch college football. And when I watch college football, I understand, hey, this guy's good at this guy's good at that. It's all about watching games, not the underwear Olympics. And a lot of talk has been about the former North Carolina quarterback Drake Maye over the last couple of days. Reminder, this show brought to you by Coastal Vibe Vacations, 850-888-0515, coastalvibevacations.com. They do a great job setting you up for a vacation rental along the Florida Gulf Coast, especially on Okaloosa Island, just west of Destin, Florida. They've got everything. These condos are absolutely beautiful. Plenty of different complexes to choose from, and it is fun for the entire family. Coastal Vibe Vacations, 850-888-0515 or coastalvibevacations.com. All right. So it was announced yesterday that Drake Maye, the North Carolina quarterback, will not throw at the NFL Combine. And this comes after we found out, or I guess we already knew, that Caleb Williams, the former USC quarterback, and Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU, will not throw as well. I have thoughts on this because I watch the NFL Network every once in a while. I don't love it. Like, as those of you know who have listened to me on SiriusXM, and not necessarily writing because you don't write about this stuff, but you know that I'm busy on Sundays. I've got the radio show on Sunday mornings on SiriusXM. We've got rankings coming out. We've got lines coming out during the season. I have the NFL on kind of in the background, but that's about it. So once the season kind of ends, the college football season, I start to pay attention. You know, of course, the playoffs and then the Super Bowl. And it goes right into the NFL Combine, which, by the way, great pacing the NFL does. It keeps itself in the discussion 24/7. So that's good. Good for them. But I was watching the NFL Network, and this was before it came out that Drake Maye was not going to throw. And there was a lot of talk about him, about how he has the most to gain in the combine, or he's the sleeper, or he's the guy that could vault up draft boards a lot like his UNC brethren, Mitch Trubisky, did. And it got me thinking, who is Drake Maye? Is he Mitch Trubisky? Is he Sam Howell? Or is he Josh Allen? A guy who bursts on the scene, who all these scouts fall in love with during the draft process and turns out to be an MVP candidate. Who is Drake Maye? So I went back and I watched the UNC game. It was the NC State game, actually, at the end of the season. And I kind of like just looked a little bit about what he does, what he doesn't do, how he moves in the pocket and things like that. And I came away thinking, and I've watched UNC games throughout the course of the fall as well. What the hell are these NFL draft scouts thinking? Because sometimes the best way to evaluate football is, I don't know, maybe watching football. Just a crazy thought, I know. Watching football might be a great way to evaluate football. Drake Maye was a decent quarterback in college. Drake Maye was an average quarterback in a below average conference. And the Tez Walker thing was interesting. I know you didn't get your chemistry with him, whatever, but the fact remains that he's extremely average in an average conference. Check this out. This is Drake Maye versus ACC opponents. Under 60% completion percentage, a 143.18 passer rating, 8.2 yards per attempt. If that's not average, I don't know what average is. You look at the completion percentages in the ACC, seventh. And let me tell you, that's behind Haynes King, Brennan Armstrong, who was benched at one point, Tyler Van Dyke, Cade Klubnik. I mean, we're not talking about superstars. Although, if you listen to this show, you know I think Cade Klubnik's going to actually be all right this year. But it's not like he had a superstar season. That's a pretty rough completion percentage. Passer rating, 4th in the ACC. It's behind Kyron Drones, who was 2nd. Now, look, I like Kyron Drones. I think he's actually going to be one of those sleeper players this year. The limited time, I guess half the season we saw him, he was pretty good. He's not an NFL caliber quarterback, especially right now. And then you look at yards per attempt. He's 3rd behind Jordan Travis and Kyron Drones. So, okay, I get that, but that's pretty good. But is it worthy of being the 2nd or perhaps even 1st quarterback off the board? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So to me, sometimes the tape don't lie. And in Drake Maye's case, the tape's not going to lie. He's Mitch Trubisky. He's the guy that you look at him, you say, oh, okay, the athleticism is there. The underwear Olympics, he's going to absolutely kill it in terms of the quarterbacks anyway. When he goes to his pro day, he's going to throw the ball 80 yards. Great. Throw the ball 80 yards. You know who also does that? Joe Milton. Tennessee fans know all about Joe Milton. Great. Good for him. Can throw the ball out of the stadium. You know who's out of the stadium? Fans. You know who's in the stadium? Players. And he doesn't really connect with them all that much. So this Drake Maye hype, it's going to be there all offseason. But if you think that he should be a first-round draft pick, you're out of your frigging mind. Drake Maye is going to be Mitch Trubisky. Drake Maye is going to be Sam Howell. And I'm not just sitting here comparing him to North Carolina quarterbacks, and it's not an indictment of North Carolina quarterbacks. But for whatever reason, 2 of the biggest draft darlings have come out of North Carolina. So, I don't know. Like, to me, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels not throwing at the combine, I understand that 100%. They're top-tier draft picks. They want to be with their receivers. Cool. Drake Maye not throwing at the combine, to me, reeks of apprehension. It tells me that, okay, the spotlight's going to be on me. Not sure if I'm ready for that spotlight. Try to avoid showing what you are because scouts might figure out what you aren't. Breaking Tea, big partner here at College Football Smothered and Covered. This is a great shirt. The kick 6. You see where Chris Davis ran around the top of that field. You see where all the blockers were, and in Alabama's case, where the defense was not. It's a great shirt. They have fantastic shirts over at Breaking Tea, whether it be college football, Braves, anything in between. They've got you covered. From NIL, individual players wearing the moment in terms of viral events or historic events like this shirt, the Kick 6. They've got it for you. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. Go to BreakingT.com/smothered and covered to get yours. Or if you're a Braves fan, like I am, wearing a Braves shirt right now. This is one of theirs. This is Throw It Again from last year's game against the Mets when Pete Alonso was talking smack to Bryce Elder, and then the wheels went falling off because the Mets are the Mets. And Tyler Matzik started heckling Pete Alonso from the Braves dugout. A phenomenal moment for the Braves. And honestly, I wouldn't say it's a depressing moment for the Mets because it's just what the Mets do. But BreakingT.com/Baird if you want to get a Braves shirt. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered if you want to get a college football shirt. Joined now by my good friend Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. You know him from the Saturday Down South podcast, as well as what he does on that great website. Connor, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. I feel bad because you've been on my show a bunch of times, and you have reached out on a few occasions for your serious show to be able to come on like a Sunday morning. And I think every single time that you've reached out, it's been after I was in Atlanta and I was flying home at that exact time. And so I feel bad that I feel like I've always been like, no, like next time. But I'm glad that we're able to do this.
Yeah, that's my fault. I should
My
invite you
fault.
on more. I should invite you on more, especially right now when we're stuck talking about hoops on that show. I mean,
Look,
not gonna lie, I like hoops, but college football is a little different.
college football is a little bit different. I'm in the same boat as you. Like I am a March college basketball guy. Even as somebody,
Mhm.
look, I thought that's what I wanted to do professionally. Like I went to Indiana. I went to a
I was gonna say
basketball.
you're a basketball guy, right?
Yeah, like I grew up with, the Fighting Illini, that D Brown, Darren Williams run was like a big part of my childhood. My mom went to Illinois. Like I thought I wanted to write about college basketball my entire life. And then you get into the college football side. Like when I went out to Nebraska and spent 2.5 years out there, and I was covering Nebraska football home games, even though they weren't, particularly dominant, 2013, 2014, end of the Bo Pelini run, it still kind of opened up my eyes to like, oh God, this is a beast, and this is what I want to be part of. So I have definitely become a March college basketball guy through and through. I'll dig into it more, starting in the next week probably. But yeah, it's college football 365.
You said D Brown, and that I think I recognize that right away. I think that dated both of us. For
Look,
the Utes out there, go look it up.
the Arizona game, I'll never forget watching that in my family room. That comeback, it's one of the great college basketball memories of my lifetime. That team was just so fun because they played a
Yeah, it
really
was.
modern style. Like Luther Head would chuck it from deep, and they just like played this up tempo style that was just so captivating. And that team not winning a national championship will always hang over the Illini.
Well, speaking of basketball schools, and I know Mark Stoops hates to hear it because he's turned Kentucky into a football school, much to the chagrin of Coach Cal, who's constantly frustrated by that. But you have been up in Kentucky. You talked to the staff up there. You got to see Brock Vandagriff, the former Georgia quarterback. So after your trip to Kentucky, what do you make of how they're feeling, especially in this new era with Texas and Oklahoma in the conference and no divisions to speak of?
It's a really interesting time, and I was there. So I was there right as Bush Hamden, their new OC, was flying in. He's going to be flying in that day. He was like doing all the prep, trying to get learn names and stuff like that. And they actually, they spring practice that's pushed back because they're trying to implement his offense and do all those things. Which that's just kind of the nature of the beast, the way that it all shook out with my doppelganger Liam Cohen going back to the NFL. And it's brutal. Like it's brutal. I think they put themselves in a really awkward spot. I shouldn't say but they are in a very awkward spot because of Mark Stoops and this 4-hour Texas A&M deal that went through and that it didn't go through. And there are ramifications of stuff like that. I
Yeah.
think the Liam Cohen thing is a byproduct of that. And so Kentucky is a school that is truly embraced NIL, and they've embraced the transfer portal. In this adapt or die world, they've adapted. They just don't have the wins to necessarily show for it. They wanted Devin Leary to be a thing, man. They wanted it so badly.
They
Like
tried. Yeah, I mean, they tried.
dude, like this time last year, I'm telling people like, watch, just watch. But there was always that little thing in the back of my mind where I'm wondering, okay, he had this one of one surgery where Dr. James Andrews, the famed Dr. James Andrews, said, I've never performed this sort of surgery, this pec injury that you had on a quarterback. So we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like long term. And there's a part of me that when I watched Devin Leary, I would think to myself, is he just struggling with the mechanics of learning this post surgery style? And it just looked off for most of the year.
Yeah.
And it's too bad. So I think they're kind of going through this interesting transition time. There's a lot of optimism about Brock Vandagriff, the untapped potential, a guy that is just chomping at the bit, ready for this opportunity. But it's a different buzz than when I was there last, which was 2021, in the midst of their historic start. I was there right before the LSU game where they just dominated them, SEC Network game that night. And it was it was a very interesting dynamic to say the least. But I think that they're hopeful that better days are ahead after a frustrating season.
This has nothing to do with this conversation, but Brock Vandagriff's dad was my assistant baseball coach at Wheeler High School. That's
No
neither here nor there.
way.
But yeah, I mean, and Greg's a great dude. He was probably the best coach I ever had in terms of assisting. Most fun. We used to go to his house and watch wrestling, like WrestleMania and things. I wasn't the biggest wrestling guy, but other people were. And I remember him giving the people's elbow to some of the players. Probably not allowed in this day and age. But you mentioned Brock, and obviously he went to Georgia with all this hype. And honestly, I was surprised he didn't transfer last offseason, but he goes to Kentucky, a place where I think he has a chance to be a star. What's the feel around that complex with what the ceiling is for Brock?
You could build an offense around him. And that is a lot of that is speculation, because the reps have been super limited. We know that it's not like we've gotten to see this guy come in and get a whole lot of live action in meaningful snaps. I mean, that's been so few and far between. But the hope, and what I've been saying for a while, I think he's Southern Will Levis. And I say that in a complimentary way. I think this guy, first of all, whatever he's listed at, he's every bit of it. I can confirm that. And I'm a small guy. I'm 5'8.5", and I tweeted out the picture standing up next to him. My first reaction was like, oh, this guy is built. I mean, all those weightlifting videos that you saw of him in high school where he's power cleaning like 315 pounds, you're just like, who is this dude? He's ready to hit people. He's ready to use his legs as part of the running game. Now, he's not going to be this, run you over nonstop, like default to his legs type guy. He'd rather be behind the line of scrimmage, navigate the pocket. He wants to show that he can throw the football. That's going to be the work in progress. And it's going to be interesting to see what the quarterback run game looks like. How many of those are by design? But I think there's a lot of hope. What have we seen from Brock Vandagriff that has told us he's not worthy of that 5-star billing that he got? Like, he couldn't beat out Stetson Bennett. He couldn't beat out Carson Beck. Like,
it's kind of hard to do that.
Right? So I won't hold that against him. I think staying 3 years is super rare for the 5-star quarterbacks. I crunched those numbers, and it is extremely rare to stay at one place for 3 years. And now in year 4, he's like, look, I got to get reps. And I don't fault a kid for doing that. They're going to build an offense around him. And I'm cautiously optimistic that Bush Hamden's going to be able to do that with the pieces that they have in place in Lexington.
All right, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and it's probably got a very complicated answer. Do you believe in Shane Beamer at South Carolina?
I do, but I wonder, man, it's setting up in a pretty frustrating way if you're Shane Beamer, right? I mean, it's one thing to lose a coach like James Coley and have Kirby take him out from under you. Those two guys, I've said it before, I'll say it again, they're not sharing a Verbo anytime soon. All right. Like, that's just no love lost between Shane Beamer and Kirby Smart, despite what they might say publicly about one another. I think that there is a path for Shane Beamer to navigate a really daunting year. I think there are 4 coaches in the SEC who are staring at just an uphill climb this year, and they're really going to have to exceed expectations if they want to avoid that hot seat talk. And Shane Beamer is one of them. Obviously, Billy Napier, Clark Lee, and Sam Pittman. Those are the 4. But Shane Beamer, his task is you got to be better in the trenches in this league. And I love the addition of Sean Elliott. Getting Sean Elliott from your neck of the woods, Georgia State, that is going to help them in the trenches. That guy knows running games like the back of his hand. He's got 5 consecutive top 40 rushing attacks. That is good news for Rocket Sanders after, look, they weren't willing to pony up in the transfer portal for a running back last year. And I thought it cost them. And their offensive line might not have yielded a whole lot of success there. They've got to get better in the trenches. Beamer ball's great. It's awesome, right? Like, when it works, it's so fun to be able to see these different ways that you can score. And that's really what Beamer ball is. It's just whoever's on the field, you can score a touchdown. And that is something that they have truly embraced. And they've been able to kind of make up for their other deficiencies at times because of that. But now, after Spencer Rattler had a really good year learning under Dowell Loggins, and I think he's going to be, one of the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks selected in the NFL draft. Like, he was great. And if you just looked at the 5-7 record, you said to yourself, you know what? I guess he didn't. No. He was excellent. So now the questions are, all right, what does this quarterback room look like? And do you really have a path to relevance? I think Ray Tanner has a lot of faith in Shane Beamer. I believe in Shane Beamer because I think this is when he's at his best. This is a guy who's got 7 wins outright as an underdog during his time, 4 of which came as a double-digit dog. Like, this is when Shane Beamer wants to stand up and prove you wrong. Last season was almost out of his element looking back on that. And I followed him at SEC Media Days, and the amount of times that he got asked about the Tennessee win and the Clemson win. Oh
Guilty.
my God.
Guilty.
Look, you have to. You have to, right? Like
Yep.
you're if you're not asking him about that, it was monumental. It was change the narrative of the program type stuff. And instead, look, this is a reminder that there's no such thing as momentum in college football. Everybody kept saying, what's the momentum coming into this year? It's like, it's great for booster support. It's great for NIL. It changes how people talk about you. But when the games actually happen, man, and like that first game that we saw against UNC, we're like, oh boy, they have major issues. So I believe that he's going to find a way to navigate this, but the path is not easy. It's a very uphill climb for South Carolina.
Connor, we haven't talked a lot about Oklahoma on the show because it's kind of been dominated by Texas. Texas and Oklahoma coming in, but Texas just made the playoff, and Sark is one of the top. So we've kind of not voided, but it's just kind of like an afterthought in terms of Oklahoma. What is Oklahoma this year, and long term, do you think they can compete in this SEC?
It's weird. I know Andy Staples has talked about this. That win total is at 7.5 wins this year.
Yeah,
the schedule's tough, man. It's tough. Texas got the better draw with the year one schedule in the SEC. There's no doubt about it. But it's interesting because you lose Jeff Lebby, you lose Dylan Gabriel. And a lot of people in Norman seem to think, no big deal. That is going to be fine. Like, I don't really care.
That might be a big deal.
It might be. You know what? I think Jeff Lebby is a great offensive mind. Maybe he left some points on the board. They still had, a top 4 offense last year?
Mm-hmm.
The optimism is Jackson Arnold. And they'll go as far as Jackson Arnold can take him, because I do feel good about a Brent Venables coach defense that returns a couple of All-Americans. You've got an All-American safety. You've got Danny Stutzman at linebacker. Like, you should feel good about that. The questions are about offense. Now, Jackson Arnold comes in with a group of receivers that are quietly really, really deep. And if you've been paying attention, you're looking at some of these guys coming back going, whoa, 1 through 5, they're going to be really, really tough to guard in the conference. And that I think will translate well in the SEC. Jackson Arnold obviously had a very mistake-prone bowl game. And if he doesn't have those 3 interceptions, we're talking about him in the way that we're talking about Nico Iamaleava, still crushing the pronunciation of that one. But it's going to be difficult.
That's right. Not doing it wrong on purpose, might I add.
I am alive. What are people doing? What are people doing? But yeah, I think Jackson Arnold is one of the most interesting players in the SEC. And he's going to go be one of those guys that is over dissected because he's a former 5-star, and the high school career that he had is going to make him a constant topic of conversation. Could he be the next great Oklahoma quarterback? But man, you look at that win total, 7.5 wins. You're scratching your head going, this is not the 2010s Oklahoma. We're not coming in with expectations like that.
Last thing, Connor, I'm not going to talk about Alabama because I've talked enough about Kalen DeBoer, and I'm sure you have as well. Across the state, though, in Auburn, Hugh Freeze sort of married himself to Peyton Thorne, at least for now, which quite honestly was a shock to me. If you're an Auburn fan, what's the bare minimum Hugh Freeze can do this year in terms of developing a quarterback, or at least developing a potent offense to give you hope that maybe he can be the guy that can lead Auburn back to glory in a couple years?
If we're not making fun of Peyton Thorne, Hugh Freeze has done his job.
It's true.
It's pretty simple. Like, if all of a sudden we're saying, oh, Peyton Thorne, better than we thought.
Good dude.
He's fine. He's a bridge the gap quarterback. He's, a little bit Graham Mertz-ish. If we're talking about him in that sort of conversation of oh, this is actually not a total disaster in the way that it was last year, then he will have probably done his job. Now, you're bringing in more talent at the receiver position. Obviously, everybody's talking about those freshman receivers. Freshman receivers in the SEC, don't get too crazy about expectations. History shows us it is not easy to come into this conference and set the world on fire. So I'm not necessarily, saying that they're going to be instant impact type guys who are going to be, in the all SEC conversation. But, with Peyton Thorne last year, I hated the fact that Hugh Freeze had to end up relying on a post-spring transfer at the quarterback position. The history of those guys doing well instantly is just not very good.
Especially when Lane Kiffin recruited everybody. He had 10 quarterbacks that he got in the winter portal.
Exactly. And Lane's just oh, we'll take another one. Well, just Spencer Sanders, you're going to hold a clipboard the entire year, but we'll take you on board. That's perfectly fine. Oh yeah, Walker Howard, come on board. That's the tough part. The market was there.
Yeah.
The market was there this year. The market was there last year. The Grayson McCall thing didn't line up because of the credits, whatever you want to believe with all that stuff. It is definitely weird to think that we're going into year 2 with Hugh Freeze and all the moves that he's made with his staff. And you've got new coordinators coming in. Cadillac Williams is no longer part of that staff. And you're like, wait a minute, Peyton Thorne is still going to be the guy? I wouldn't feel good about that if I'm an
No.
Auburn fan. And look, while I do think the year 2 for those post spring transfer guys, it does bode well. It bodes better than it did the year prior for sure. I still am not feeling like all of a sudden, hey, we're going to be in the 12-team playoff discussion. I don't think they're anywhere close to that. And I think that there was a world in which they could have set themselves up to be in those conversations had they nailed the quarterback decision. And I don't believe they've done that yet.
Well, and here's the thing too with Hugh Freeze, it's Bo Wallace, it's Chad Kelly, it's Malik Willis.
Sure.
Like, it's not like these dudes are going to the NFL and being superstars, but they're superstars in college. And to me, like, I went to Auburn, but it's like, okay, why can't you even do that with Peyton Thorne? And if you can't do that with a guy who had really 2 really good seasons in the Big Ten, to me, it kind of gives me pause as to, okay, who can he do? Can he even do it moving forward?
I still have faith in Hugh Freeze. I'm not crazy about the going back and forth with the play calling thing. I loved his approach at
It's
SEC.
very Gus Malzahn-ish.
It is. And man, if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm like, oh boy. I know
Flashbacks.
We paid $21.5 million to move on from that. Look, I think that Hugh Freeze long term is still set up well. I think he's doubting himself a little bit. And I think there are some moments that just make me wonder, is he kind of feeling the heat? Is he looking back at his predecessor and saying, well, that guy didn't make it till the end of year 2. He got fired on Halloween of year 2. Oh, the guy before him, again, $21.5 million at the time, the richest buyout ever. And then Jimbo Fisher happened. But I think he's looking at those two things and going, oh boy, I've got to figure things out in a hurry. And that's good. It's good to coach with a sense of urgency to a certain extent. But at a certain point, man, you'd like to think that he's confident in what he's going to be able to do developing the quarterback position and not stubborn. There's a very fine line that Billy Napier is kind of walking right now in that arena. But yeah, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that eventually we're going to look at a quarterback on the Plains and say, dang, Hugh Freeze, he's still got it, man.
Maybe it's in the transfer portal this spring, or maybe it's Peyton Thorne, or maybe it's 2 years from now. It's going to be fascinating because Auburn is not necessarily known as a place with patience.
Yeah, that's an understatement, man.
Not exactly a patient place. Well, Connor, appreciate it. Tell people where you can find your stuff, how you can listen, how you can watch, how you can read. I mean, you do everything everywhere.
Yeah, I appreciate that. SaturdayDownSouth.com. We have just tons and tons of coverage right now. Not just basketball coverage. If you're just into the football stuff, we still, write and talk about football all the time. We talk about football year round on the Saturday Down South podcast, YouTube, Saturday Down South. All of our episodes are up there as well. Lots and lots of great content that we can be talking about in late February, early March. That isn't just, random brackets that we're coming out with. I know that's the name of the game, but yeah, I always tell people SaturdayDownSouth.com is the one-stop shop for any college sports, man.
Yeah, and you know what? There's spring practices happening. So It really never sleeps these days. What about off season? Where did it go? Connor, appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
That'll do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Appreciate you checking out the show. If you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, spread it around. Hit that notification bell. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, don't forget to subscribe there. Leave a review. No matter how you're consuming this show, please leave a review. If it's a 5-star, great. Leave that review. If it's not, if you hate me, if you hate this show, leave a 1-star review. Leave a terrible review. I don't care as long as you let me know what you like and what you dislike. Y'all have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.